Hello, hello, and welcome back to Bearing Birth, a birth story podcast highlighting the emotional impact of birth, the immediate postpartum period, and the years beyond. I'm Sophie, a perinatal mental health therapist.
And I'm Jordan, a doula specializing in postpartum support. Yes, welcome to another amazing episode.
Woohoo!
Today we have the privilege of chatting with Libby Mukhi. She is a mother of 2 daughters, a postpartum doula, and a birth story listener. She also has a certification in perinatal mental health through Postpartum Support International. If you listen to our most recent episode, you'll already be familiar with Libby as we had her on to share her birth stories. If you haven't listened yet, we highly recommend listening to that episode first.
Yeah, definitely go back and listen to that one.
Yes, and I was introduced to Libby by a mutual friend in the birth world because of her work as a birth story listener, and we have a birth story podcast. So I immediately knew we had to have her on someday, and our conversation with her did not disappoint.
It really didn't, and I'm just so grateful that you connected us with Libby because, one, I just want to reiterate that the work that she does is an amazing offering for people who have given birth and people, who are supporting birth. And then 2, meeting her changed my life and changed my perspective on my own birth story. I ended up doing a birth story processing session with her. And so this interview was personally very meaningful for me.
Oh my gosh, that is so exciting. I'm really curious what that was like for you.
It was really amazing, and I'll be honest, I was initially skeptical at how someone could process their birth in just that single session of 90 minutes, like Libby said, but it really was all I needed. It gave me so much to think about afterwards and hold on to and process. And Libby talks more about how that short structure and timing of the session, how the magic happens in that. And I definitely agree that it's just the perfect, sweet amount of time to take things from.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I'll share more about that how that went with Libby when I share my birth story. But I definitely highly recommend booking a session with Libby if there's something that you are having trouble with around your birth experience, trouble understanding or letting go of, or you just want to, even if something positive happened in it, which I hope positive things did happen. I mean, processing doesn't have to be just to get through negative things. It can be a positive reminiscing about or coming back to.
Yeah, totally. I feel like I'm finding myself recommending her work to all of my clients now because everybody can benefit from it. But, that's so cool. I'm really eager to hear more when you tell your birth story. In today's episode, Libby digs deeper into what goes into her work as a birth story listener.
Yeah, she covers everything from how she got into this type of work. And spoiler alert, it does have to do with her birth experiences. And then she also talks about what a typical processing session looks like and how a person might benefit from a session.
She also discusses what processing a birth means to her and the power of storytelling and incorporating rituals into postpartum care.
We just want to say to our listeners, thank you so much for supporting us so far and following along on the podcast. It really means a lot to both of us and to our team of 3 here behind the scenes. We've got many exciting episodes coming this year, including an episode with my very own grandma, and then an interview with another couple where we chat with them before and after their birth, and then so much more coming, so stay tuned.
Yes, we are so grateful for your support as listeners, and we are very much looking forward to putting more episodes out into the world.
Make sure you check out the awesome resources discussed in the episode linked in the description, including Baby Blues Connection and more information on that organization. And you can also find information on how to get in touch with Libby if you want to work with her for your own birth story processing.
Okay, enjoy this part 2 episode with Libby.
A doula and a therapist are sitting down to talk about birth. A doula and a therapist are sitting down to talk about birth.
A question that I had was, you mentioned going to therapy and like at a certain point you realized it was the time for therapy, and then you spoke about taking the course for becoming a birth story listener. Was that all around the same time? Or did you do therapy before?
No, therapy was before. I'm trying to place it all in my mind. I bet it was. So I started therapy at some point when the pandemic had struck, and I was just really struggling, like probably so many of us. And I also started meditating around the same time. I signed up for this class, another very profound, one of the most life-changing things other than like the birth story medicine class was this meditation course I did. And I didn't realize when I signed up for it that I would be meditating every day for like 2 months. And I don't think I would have done it if I had realized what I was signing up for. Because I'd always thought I just wasn't a meditator. I was like, oh, I just have this monkey mind and it's just not for me. And I'm just more like, I like yoga or things where I'm like moving and doing something. And so, you know, as it turns out, like it's exactly what I needed to be doing because it was so challenging. And it just changed my life. It changed, my anxiety was so much better. I didn't have the like physical manifestations of it in my back and shoulder tension, like all of that went away. It opened up my mind. It was sort of the like catalyst for my like spiritual awakening. Like it was just really a profound experience. I ended up meditating every day for like 6 months before I finally fell off and just started doing it here and there. But it just was such an important part of getting me through the pandemic. And the therapy as well. They kind of like worked really nicely together. And I think that's something I always like to remind people is like, you don't just have to have one tool. It's really nice to have a whole suite of tools that you can pull from and that complement each other. So yeah, and then I bet I signed up. I bet the birth story class was probably another like maybe 6 months down the road from that. Mm-hmm. And that actually was far more impactful than my therapy. I hope you're not listening, therapists. Like, it was just a different approach that worked really well for me in terms of rather than just kind of like talking through things and talking about what comes up, but really having this like systematic approach to uncovering what's happening down below the surface really worked for me and my personality. But yeah, it's sort of this harmonious way that all of those tools work together.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing how learning something with intent to use it to support other people can help you so much. I love that. You spoke a little bit about like the steps you take, you know, with the journaling. Did you sort of cover all of the different aspects of the course that you took already?
So no, it was more involved than that. So I just thought the first course with the journaling was really fascinating because I, again, wouldn't have probably wanted to do that if I'd known what it was before. So it was kind of a good thing that I went into it a little bit blind, but it was, so you did the journaling, really started to learn those different voices. They kind of root a lot of it in archetypical energies. So it helps you identify like, oh, this is my orphan energy speaking if it's talking about abandonment stuff or, or my judge or my inner child. And it just gives you this kind of map or framework to help understand where these different parts of yourself are connected to or coming from. So you kind of go through the journaling to give us that new perspective. And then basically Pam England over years and years and years has identified this map. And so you're kind of just guiding people's brains through their story, allowing their subconscious to select a moment that needs to be looked at more closely, and then examining it together and kind of drilling way down into understanding how does that show up in your life? How, you know, and just kind of taking them through this series of questions, basically. And the analogy that I always use for that is like, I think the instinct is we want to actually just share our whole story. We want to be heard. We want to like talk about it. And we deserve that. And we need to be heard in that way. But you can't actually process it, right? It's kind of like trying to digest, like eat an entire chocolate cake in one sitting where you're like, it sounds like a good idea. That actually doesn't sound like a good idea, but I want to do it. It seems like that will be delicious. But like your body can't digest that. Whereas if you take it one slice at a time, you can actually enjoy, like to process it. And so I think it's a similar experience with the birth story stuff.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the word process and what that means? And like if somebody's not familiar with therapy or going to therapy and they're hearing that word for the first time, like what do you do when you help someone process their story, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah. I kind of utilize some different frameworks in my work. And one of the things I really love is Brene Brown always talks about like closing the stress cycle or closing the loop. And so this idea that we tend to like, when something happens to us, we often, or we inflict something on someone else. Like if I yell at my kids or something, we don't close that loop. Like we don't see that all the way through. And then you can kind of get stuck in it. And that's where you're just like stuck in this moment. And so to me, helping someone process these moments, it means giving them the space that they need to look at it from some different perspectives, and hopefully come to a place where they feel an innate sense that they can like let go of it. And that grip then loosens, and it's able to, it doesn't go away, but it doesn't have this like hold on them anymore. Because it doesn't need to go away. It's a part of your story now. It's a part of your life and who you are, but it doesn't need to like suffocate you, or keep pulling energy away from other things that make you feel good. Like, so I think, for me, it's through the process of the work, like people are able to see the story from a different angle that takes the power away from it and kind of helps give them their own power back.
Yeah. Are you familiar with narrative therapy?
No.
It reminds me a lot about that approach where you share everything you can and put your whole story out on the table, whatever specific story that is. And then you like deconstruct it, and then you put back the parts that you want in a way that fits better for you and, lets you, move on somehow.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. I'd say it's similar. I think all the parts can even still be there, but it's just how you're looking at them or what you're naming them as, or what, how you're responding to those parts. Like it's because I think one thing that's important to note is trauma to me can look like so many things. Like I think it's natural to kind of assume, oh, okay, well, we weren't like life flighted to the hospital, or my baby wasn't in the NICU, or these things that like clearly are extremely traumatic. But it can be as simple as not feeling seen or heard, right? That's sounds like I'm minimizing that because that's very powerful to feel seen and heard. But
it can seem like such a small moment.
But those can stick with you. And it's that stickiness that I think of a lot and kind of speak to a lot, is like, it's just like helping unstick some of it so that it can flow a little easier.
And like maybe also giving you a sense of agency and consent that you're allowing that part to be on you versus it's just there.
Sure. Great. Yep.
Does allowing yourself to feel emotions from specific events play in to processing? I feel like a lot of times, especially with trauma and difficult things, it's sort of like I have to push that away so that I can't feel those feelings. So I imagine like allowing yourself to feel those things could be part of it also.
Totally. I've definitely supported some people who it requires a lot more kind of strategy and bypassing the like conscious brain, because our brains really want to protect us, right? And so you can just feel it when people are like putting up these guards or these barriers or these, like these walls come up all of a sudden and in very subtle ways, right? Where it might be like you're trying to understand this idea of, a common narrative is like feeling weak versus strong, right? I felt weak. People might say like, oh, I felt so strong. And I was like, but did you feel strong? Like actually, like, and just really trying to drill down into that. And what actually comes up would be the opposite. But our brain really wants so badly to protect us that it will tell us that,
which has probably protected people in huge ways, like saved people's lives.
Sure.
So those are like obviously beneficial, but at a certain point, you have to figure out a way around those
Right.
natural blocks.
Totally. And I'd say in a lot of cases, if someone is sort of seeking out this kind of support, they're often ready for it. Like, I would never try and encourage someone to do this who wasn't. You have to be ready to go there, because it takes a lot of bravery and courage to like explore those dark, cobwebby parts of yourself. But again, I just like love a good analogy. It's like you shine the light on it and it takes the power away, right? It's just like being a kid in the dark and seeing this thing that looks like a monster, and you shine the light on it and you're like, oh, it's my coat hanging there or something. It's like it takes the bravery to face it, but so often that's like half the battle, you know?
Yeah.
The anticipation of talking about it or analyzing it deeper. But then once you're doing it, it feels, and with a safe person too, that's like a big, important part of it.
Yeah.
You have to, I imagine, like let your client know that you are a safe person and establish rapport and
That's
things
right.
with them.
Yeah. And just acknowledging their vulnerability and their courage, you know? Because just like the scariest moment of like that potential monster in the corner is like turning the light on, and you're really scared it might actually be a monster, you know, and then you realize, oh, okay, like you can, once you've looked at it, it just becomes less scary.
Yeah. How can you share a little bit about like the typical work that you do? Like if you had one client, would it be like, what's the length or the frequency of sessions, or how do you see them, virtually or in person? What do you do?
So unlike therapy, I do like to always make sure it's very clear that I'm not a therapist. I absolutely love therapists. I am such an advocate. I like to think of this work as a complement to therapy. So often it's just one session, which is wild. And it's like almost hard. I kind of would have been quite skeptical of that myself before doing it. But the way that it works, it just feels almost like magic. But it really is not the kind of thing where you're doing ongoing sessions. In some cases, people might have 2 moments that they're really struggling. So we might break that into like 2 sessions. But it's almost always just like a one-time thing. The sessions usually run between 60 minutes, 90 minutes at the most. But it follows such a clear kind of path that the person you're supporting would have no idea what you're going through, but it keeps sort of these boundaries around it and helps you stay very focused and helps you guide them through without getting too lost in narrative that's not going to support their healing in that moment. Like you kind of it requires a lot of like focus. But yeah, it's virtual, which is pretty cool because then you can have access. The big thing is we do always requires such a, I don't love the word, but we would recommend having childcare so that people can really focus on their healing. Because I think if you have your baby there, sometimes you change the story, even subconsciously, because you don't want to.
The little ears to hear.
Yeah.
That
makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And I think another thing to think about is like, it's pretty wild. Like I've worked with people who were processing stuff from 17 years before, and they tell that story as though it happened yesterday. You would never know it was like that long ago. And the power of the stickiness, like it can just, you can carry that with you your whole life, you know, and vice versa. Like you kind of need a little space between. I wouldn't recommend someone trying to process their birth like within days of it happening. It's like you almost just need ideally a couple weeks in between at the minimum, just to get a little space from it, and then you can like work through it better. That's my approach. Other people might have a different way, but
do you find people are mostly like kind of ready to talk and just sort of bursting with like, this is what happened and this is what I want to share?
So yeah, so basically what it is I would start, we always start with an intention just to try to be clear on what it is we're trying to get out of the session. if I had to generalize, there's usually something around feeling more peace with whatever happened, but not always. And then I have them kind of take me through like a bird's eye view of their birth, the prep, the birth itself, and then post, like 3 to 5 minutes, just like a quick, just to give me the lay of the land. And then I take them through a guided visualization, and they select, through this kind of meditative process, they select a moment. And it's really interesting. So often what happens is the person comes up with a moment they haven't even considered or really thought about much at all. And it's very often not the moment that you would think it would be. Every session is different. Every person is different. But there are some like consistencies, and that's one of them. And then we drill down, and we kind of talk about, it's essentially taking them through like past into present, imagining they're in the present moment, and then kind of seeing it through the future, and then applying some different tools around helping them see it through a more compassionate lens, or just reframing it to see the potential for change and healing, and helping their brains understand that they're on this scale or this spectrum of the experience, and that we don't expect ourselves to go from 1 to 10 overnight, right? But we might go from 3 to 4, like, and just seeing, kind of just helping reframe, whether it be like the black and white thinking or the perfectionism or whatever, those kind of expectations that they carry around themselves, like helping them look at those through a different, it's really actually not about the story. It's about those deeper narratives, right? And just helping them understand those parts of themselves a little better, which then allows that stickiness. It kind of allows that specific memory that's carrying so much weight or power to be kind of released a little bit, because it's part of a much bigger ecosystem.
Right. It's connected to like other stories that have nothing to do with the birth.
Right. And once their brain can draw that connection, it seems to be quite effective.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, yeah, it's so interesting. I feel like it reminded me of you talking about being like stuck in the dark, or like the dark, deep places. It's sort of like you're coming in and sort of like combing through and being like an outside perspective. And it sounds like being so focused and really lasering in on certain spots with that outside perspective, it makes sense that it would just take you out of just taking those small, not necessarily small, but seemingly small, like traumatic moments, and just sort of like having that be a part of this big dark mush, and making them reachable.
Right. Yeah, totally. And yeah, to your question too, you just sort of asked if people are usually like bursting, like willing to come talk. I think people always, often, maybe not always, most often want to talk all about the story. But then as you start to drill down, that's when it can kind of be a little
come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like we love the surface part. And even then, it's like we just kind of can't tell those stories enough, because it's so important to us, right? And I think people often say, like, right when you've had the baby, people are expecting to hear it and stuff, but then you get to a certain point where like you feel like you kind of can't keep telling that story, even though you want to, and you need to. But I think it's like there's a fine balance of making sure people feel heard in that, and giving them the space to do that and share that, but not letting them get carried away by that to where we lose the focus we need to actually create some real peace for them, some freedom from what's actually kind of bogging them down.
Yeah, in therapy you have two terms. It's the content versus the process. The content is all the story and what the person says, like on a surface level, and then the process is like how they said it, all the things you can't see.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah. So it's just I find it just endlessly fascinating how everyone's the same but different. It's pretty cool.
Do you have any specific way that you hold space for someone who experienced a traumatic birth? How does your presence play into the process?
I think personally, I find it, I take it very seriously. So I always sort of meditate myself, even though it's done virtually. I just totally believe you can like feel that stuff right through the computer. Yeah. So I, meditate. I just kind of will like use my Palo Santo and kind of smudge the space I'm going to be in and light a candle and have water. And I'll usually recommend the person have, ideally something warm to drink. I think that can really, for whatever reason, it's just conducive to this type of work. If we were in person, there's like such a beautiful, the tea, just like pouring tea for someone and the ritual of that. But I do like to kind of just ground, just even taking a few deep breaths together before we start, like not taking them through a big meditation or something, but just to kind of ground together. But yeah, I do a lot of intention setting around I trust this person and their subconscious to guide them where they need to be. I don't need to fix them and they don't need to be fixed. And I think a big part of creating space is not feeling the need to offer a solution, and again, we just don't know what, like something that sounds horribly traumatic to you might not even be something that was traumatic to them. They might be like, oh no, that part was fine. It was this that I was like, so you can't assume anything, you know?
I find that's like a huge theme in all birth work. You can't make any assumptions. And it sounds, I was just like thinking back on some other things you said when you said like, I don't need to fix this. It's like a similar theme to your tendency to want to do things right, or even the intention of coming into this work is like to want to help. And it's cool that you take the intention of, every time coming in and being like, I'm not here to do any specific fixing and changing like that. I'm not making sense, but do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah.
No, thank you for seeing that. Yeah, it's. I think so much of it is like we're all on our own journeys, trying to figure out what our own narratives are, and I think I wouldn't be able to do this work if I hadn't faced a lot of this stuff on my own and gone there myself and gone through some very dark kind of, my like dark night of the soul moment of just like,
is that a reference?
I think it is a term. Yeah. Okay. Like it's because it's just like, ooh, it's so intense when you're down in it. I feel like you're in like this cave or something, just like trying to find your way around. But it then allows you to be able to help guide others through their own little caves.
Do you think that instead of coming into it with the intention of fixing, do you think it's more of here's my offering of space and like some tools that I've learned about that are helpful? Like, is that more of what you're offering than solutions?
Yeah. Or even, yeah, kind of, I would say it's like the space is sort of having, I have the map,
guidance,
but I'm letting them, I'm kind of gently pointing us toward, I'm going to stick with this cave. So we're going to just ride this analogy all the way into the ground. We're like working, like I have the map. I actually know how to get them out of the cave, but I need them. I'm working with them to find their own way out so that they can then feel empowered and have like worked through that. So it's a really interesting, to kind of have this framework or this tool that you can't be like, okay, here's what we're doing. You just have to like gently kind of listen, like guide them through and listen to what they're saying, but also what they're not saying. And there's just a lot of nuance in it. And I think that, again, this is a moment of something that's really challenging for me. And at times is also a huge gift for me as being like a highly sensitive person. I can just feel into those things, especially that they're not necessarily saying. And so that I think is just a personal strength of mine that like helps me in this work. But yeah, because you just kind of have to like set a safe space and then sometimes it's about pausing and like being very uncomfortable in that silence and just we're just going to sit here and like let your brain do its work. And it's really like that's what I found the most challenging when I first started, was like being in that uncomfortable space and even probing a little bit, because my mentor in this work she was just like, she would kind of push a little like, well, you're here, you're saying you feel strong, but like, why are we here then? You know, kind of just a little bit of like tougher love. Like I would be like, oh, well, they don't want to talk about it, so I don't want to push them. And, you know, I'd be so sensitive to their privacy and their boundaries and their, you know, that like it's such an art to kind of like gently probe and help kind of like guide them to like going there, but not forcing, you know. It's just it's kind of hard to almost explain. It's
like leading from a gentle step behind, or like you hold their hand into the cave.
Yes.
But like, how do you do that skillfully? It is hard.
Yeah. And like being like, they might trip in the cave. It's dark. They may hurt themselves, but they'll get up and they'll be okay, you know?
Knowing that they have the capacity to get back up, and trusting that, like trusting the process of what's happening.
A lot of it is, it's like, I trust them. I trust that they know what they need. It's none of it is even me. I'm not doing any of it. I'm just like helping them get to what was already there. Right.
Yeah.
It's like scaffolding.
That's a great,
What are some of the benefits of processing a birth story?
I think personally, it's like, again, we put a lot of pressure and power on birth specifically, because it is something you really are likely only going to do, you know, a time or two, maybe 3 or 4, like not many times in your life. And there's so much, it's so sacred, and there's so much like ritual and myth. There's just so much around it. It's such a rich, like, moment in a person's life. That then when it doesn't go the way you want, or you find yourself stuck in a place with that, I think it can like take up a lot more capacity and energy than we even realize. It's like this hidden thing, like lurking in your brain, just sort of absorbing energy and feeding back to you, more just like reinforcing these deeper stories, right, that we've always carried with us. And I think when you kind of can learn to, you go through the experience of processing something like that, it can then ideally set the stage for doing more of that throughout the rest of your life. You then start to become aware of these parallels and these red threads that run through your own perception of yourself. And then it kind of can like then take the power away from that in future moments too. It's not just about the birth, in my opinion. It's like a broader and deeper kind of understanding of who you are.
Yeah. Like the birth itself might only happen once, but it's such a catalyst for so much transformation and inner introspection.
That's right. Yeah. It's very much like, this is all just like self-development kind of work, really. Just like
learning. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah. How to self-actualize.
I think so. I mean, and there are probably a lot of people out there who go through all kinds of crazy stuff, and they just aren't there. They just don't even, they're not really interested. They're going to live in a different way, and that's great for them too. And but if you're someone who is kind of self-aware and just like pays attention to that stuff, and I think it can just give you a lot of freedom and create space for the things that serve you better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you find that there's, I guess my question is, what are the signs that someone's ready to process their birth? And is that just, they're coming to you, or do you see similarities in people who are ready versus people who are not ready?
I saw when I was going through I didn't even I'm not a very linear thinker. I should have started this whole thing with that. I could just spiral about. So in the birth story medicine school. So you go through, you learn all the map, then you have to do a whole bunch of sessions, and you just keep doing them until basically your mentor instructor feels like you really got it. And it seems kind of like, in theory, it seems kind of simple. Like, oh, okay, you follow these steps and you do this thing, but it's because it is so nuanced, and it's so, you really have to understand the like deeper human experiences of the things like the black and white thinking, and, you know, some of these like narratives that we all hold in some way, to kind of like get a handle on that. And then how are you offsetting it? It's not really by saying like, you know, well, but of course you were strong. You know, it's actually like the opposite, where it's like, well, we can't ever always be strong, can we? Like, it's okay to be weak. It's like reinforcing the other side of it, which is quite interesting. So it took me at least a long time to get that, to like really let it like sink in. So you just do tons and tons of these births, and you're doing them just like, I put like notes out to people, kind of was a connect, you know, through the birthing community. As a postpartum doula, I had access to kind of, you know, people who were interested. And that's where I really was coming across people who you could tell actually weren't ready. And it's just, it felt a bit like trying to pull a horse along or something. Like they weren't, they would walk when they wanted to, but then when they didn't, like you couldn't get them through. Like they would just, the boundaries and the little walls they'd put up were so secure. Like they just you couldn't quite get around it. And part of that would have been my own skill set at that part of my journey, just not having done as many. But also part of it was, it's just harder if someone's not really willing like to go there. But now it's most of the people who come, they find me because they're looking for something very specific, right?
Yeah.
It's not a broad, it's a very niche thing we're talking about here. So I think it kind of, it's a good thing because it means they're going to get more out of it.
Once they find you, they're ready.
Yeah. But I work with a lot of like postpartum clients who you can tell just, to me, the signs that someone is not ready is really when you're not even getting the full story of how they're doing on a day-to-day basis, right? When you can tell they're like, oh no, we're fine. It's like a lot of sugarcoating and a lot of just where, you know, they're not, you can see it. You hear, you know, for certain that they're not great, but they can't even admit that part. Like that's when it's really hard to go deeper.
So they're in denial in a way.
I'd say so. Yeah. Or even if they do know, like they just can't bear to be seen as someone who's not excelling. You know?
Yeah. Has your being a birth story listener now, has that changed your work as a postpartum doula?
Yeah, in a way, it's kind of, I've started to slowly step away from the postpartum doula work because I just crave the early days or nights, right? It's like I crave the most raw moments. And in many postpartum doula relationships with my clients, like it starts out like that. And then you kind of get them in this good solid footing. You've established these systems, help them establish these systems. And then it kind of moves into very tactical, just like practical support that they absolutely need. But I also feel like there are so many people who are out there who can help them fold their laundry and do dishes and get like clear space in just like day-to-day tasks so they can rest and recover and bond. That like, but not everyone can help you on a deep emotional part of your journey becoming a parent. And I feel like that's something I can do. So I'm just trying to lean more into that. So it's kind of ended up sort of stepping away a little. I still do postpartum doula support, but not, I'm trying to kind of step more into this other component of the work.
You talked about like your own rituals for, you know, grounding yourself before you get into a session. Are there any things that you invite clients to do after you've done a session with them, or any alternative healing methods or just, yeah, things they can do in tandem with something like a birth story session therapy.
Yeah, I try to, again, because I don't want to offer a bunch of, it depends on the person. I try to follow their lead, but I have so many things. I think I usually would always recommend, if they have the space in their day, to just do some journaling. If they're a bath taker, like just taking as much space as they're able to, having a baby, usually, to let it just start to seep in, and then kind of also making sure they know to just be patient with it. Like, cause sometimes the insights don't quite come to the surface. Things don't quite click. It can take time for that integration process. And so just to like be gentle with yourself and just kind of witness what you're noticing over the next, month. And yeah, just to kind of take it slowly, because it's not a light switch. Sometimes it is, but it's usually kind of, there's a process to it. And then in terms of like, I mean, I love, there's some healing stuff I've done personally that I just found so powerful. One of which, here in Portland, there's Luna Wellness. They offer a womb healing session that's so amazing from a physical and spiritual, just kind of like hits all the facets, emotional, spiritual, mental, like it's everything. But she does a lot of like abdominal massage and uses like herbal compresses and also guides you through these visualizations. And I just found it so profound, because it wasn't like just getting body work done. It was so much deeper than that. And I love that as like I think we just are like grossly short on ritual in this culture. Like we've just lost total touch, and we we need it as humans. I think the more we can incorporate ritual into these big moments of our lives, like the better.
Yeah, it makes things easier to process.
And you feel held by your community and your people, and you're often not doing rituals. We can do individual rituals, but a lot of that stuff is done with the support of others. And I think, again, kind of going back to, as I was talking about, how I feel like in order to ideally to be set up for success, you should have community and support, making sure they have that. And if they don't, trying to help connect them to resources for new parent groups or whatever that might look like, just to try to make sure because it's like, it's just so hard to do self work like this, like that inner work, when you don't have any kind of space in your life because you're totally consumed caring for this new baby. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. There's like this question around rituals and like how we've lost touch with, I'm like, did we even have that as a culture? Like the US?
Yeah.
How can we find ritual without, like, I don't know, stealing from other cult? Like how do we go about creating rituals and
in a modern world?
Mm-hmm. And even like listening and storytelling comes from indigenous cultures.
Totally.
And I was wondering if in your education and your journey as being a birth story listener, have you learned anything about where like the power of storytelling and where it comes from?
Not specifically, but I do just love the study of how other cultures handle the postpartum experience for people. And when I think about like confinement hotels in China, right?
Yeah.
And how that sounds sort of like torturous. The word confinement is not my choice I would use, but I didn't name it. But just this idea that like, you're going to go take the first, month, the 40 days, like, and you're going to be in this hotel and you're going to be cared for, and you're going to drink these warm, these soups and eat these healing foods, and just their understanding or their approach of healing in a physical way first, but also just all these, just having that support and someone's caring for your baby. And I just think like it's so different than anything we could really comprehend as Americans, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it's like even now, you know, just these smaller communities, I'm thinking more in like villages than like small towns in America, but like there'd just be a lot of, you know, people surrounded by their aunts and neighbors and cousins and people who've come there, who've gone through this before, right? And I think it's just breaks it right down into the like rawness of being a birthing person and being held by other people who've given birth. And that's like, to me, what I craved the most. And I think sometimes ritual can be as simple as that, you know? And I think we try, I see us like getting close to it in some of these groups, parent groups, and just having the space and meeting consistently and learning from each other and just having a non-judgmental space to share is really powerful. And it doesn't have to be these complex things for people to get a lot of value out of it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to look a certain way. Like you can advocate for yourself, like what you need or what you would need from family and friends and community, and create a ritual for yourself. Like the meal train I see as a really powerful way that the community can come together, and having like a celebration of your initiation into parenthood. Yeah. Where it's about what you, like celebrating the change that you go through before that new person enters the world. But those I think all come from like what we used to do as humans, like gather around and hold people and take care of each other. And we've just so lost that.
Yeah. You almost have to like push back on what's like normal in America to find those things. Because like we spoke about before, you know, like being here, it's very much like everyone has to work so hard and you have to go all the time and you get only so much time off of work. And that takes away from our ability to create those rituals, including, you know, anything for the transition, but also like for the storytelling. How can you have the space to fully tell your story when you're not supposed to complain, or, you know, there's, you know, just no time in general. So that's what we want, you know, we want people to be able to tell their stories, and that's one very small part of it, but it can have a massive impact.
I love that. There's this sort of new movement of shifting from like baby showers as this weird capitalism, give the person a bunch of stuff for their baby, nothing for themselves. It's going to help support the parents, you know. It's all just like, yes, they need these things in many cases, but like it doesn't lend to like a deeper feeling of support. And so I've just seen some people doing recently, like kind of like baby showers, but rooted in support. So people come over and like help them organize their spaces and bring them frozen meals so they have it, and do deep clean the house together, get the yard like
this.
I've seen more of that recently too.
Yeah.
Or like even just like forcing them to like relax, like fully relax, like even incorporating massage and things like that.
All of it. Like that is to me getting closer to what we've been desperately craving for all this time. It's like we don't need more cute onesies.
Yeah. It's
cute.
more about the people giving the gifts, really, because they get a chance to buy something cute.
But I think people also don't know what they don't know, and we forget, like if they didn't receive real deep support, they don't then know how to provide deep support. And so how can we just start to teach people how to support others, you know? And then I think I also had another thought of like, I love ritual in this sort of grander sense, but I also really like the idea of like these micro rituals that you just do for yourself. So one of the things I did was like, I just know how important hydration is. And so I had this like pitcher that I this beautiful like glass pitcher just from IKEA, nothing fancy, but like I loved the pitcher. It brought me joy. I would fill it with tons of ice, even though I think you're technically supposed to drink warmer things, but I like ice water. So, and I'd put all this like citrus, like lemons and cut up cucumber, like spa water basically. And I just would make this huge pitcher for myself in the day, and it would sit there, and it was just part of my ritual of like, I've never been great at caring for myself historically, and I'm getting better about that. But that was a moment where I really can look back and say, like, that was a cue for me to like care for myself rather than just like drinking water. It's like making it a little bit special.
Yeah. You know? Small moments of joy.
And I think thinking about how you might be able to do that, whether it's like having a really nice chocolate bar that you know, have pieces of when you're feeding, or just ways to turn like moments that can otherwise feel a little bit monotonous or like drudgery at times. Like, how do you make those work for you? And that could be by creating some ritual, whether it's like, that's when you listen to your audiobook, or, you know, there's something for yourself that, because we can like layer these experiences. It doesn't just have to be feeding the baby or, you know, holding them while they take a contact nap. Like, you can then also do something that serves you as well.
Yeah. You don't have to be like miserable.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And mine is doing the dishes at night, like a reset for the next day. It has to get done, and it's gonna get done. And make it something that you enjoy. Like, force yourself somehow to, and then you somehow enjoy it.
Yeah, that's right. I love that. Yeah.
We're gonna live in this country, in this world where we're all go, and so we have to find small ways to make moments where we don't feel like we're constantly going.
Absolutely. And it's sometimes it's pretty crazy to me how powerful those small moments can really be in terms of you feeling cared for, taking care of your own needs. Like, as much as I would love for us to live in a world where other people just automatically knew how to take care of your needs for you, like, they don't. And it's really not their job, if I'm honest. Like, it's art. We have to care. We have to, like, we make ourselves happy. We have to, nobody knows how to like do our work for us. We have to do it ourselves. And so I think in some ways it's like taking that responsibility onto yourself, and also as it relates to others, right? It's also not my job to make you happy right now. So I can't, like, I just can't do it. So I'm going to work on how to do that for myself. And sometimes when you're in this, you don't have a lot of space when you're a new parent, like, it is those micro moments where you can kind of show up for yourself a little bit better. And then all of a sudden you might notice the resentment kind of fades away, and like, it can really shift your perspective.
I think everyone in postpartum could take care of themselves a little bit more. I feel like that's really good advice, because I mean, there's so much weight.
But like, making it accessible, because there's nothing worse than the like self-care narrative of like, oh, dude, you just need more self-care. And it's like, cool. How am I supposed to do that? But if you really break it down into these very small little moments, or little like gestures almost, that feels more accessible, I think, when you're exhausted and you're caring for someone. But it's choosing to just like slow down in a moment. For me, it was a lot. One of the ways is like, I use like this face oil at night, and it was like taking a moment to like smell the oil and just massage it into my face, that little extra bit, you know, just because it felt better than just like quickly slapping it on. And so it can be very subtle.
Yeah. You don't have time to take a bath, but you have time to like
wash
smell your hands and paws.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then it's like slowing down, whatever that's a ritual in itself too, putting lotion or oil on your face.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's caring for your skin and caring for you. Earlier I was saying, like, I brought muffins to the neighbor, and we've been bringing them food every couple of days, and they respond with this like over gratitude, which I understand because I did the same thing
Yeah.
with when you helped me.
You did.
I was like, thank you so much. I don't know how I did what I did to deserve all of this support. And
I will say that you didn't overdo it. I know that you were checking yourself.
Yeah. but I'm like, it can also be self-care to just let people care for you and to be okay with that story and like let that go, that you don't need to feel ashamed that people are helping you, and that's so hard to get out of though.
Yeah. It is.
Take like the worry of what you're like putting them out, like take that out of the narrative, especially with people who are in your life, like trying to present themselves as someone who wants to offer support.
Yeah. All the overthinking.
Yeah, I distill that down for myself, and often I'll share it with clients of like, it's so simple, but it's just like, I deserve blank, right? I deserve to enjoy this moment. I deserve to enjoy my baby. I deserve to be happy. I deserve to take care of myself, my basic human needs right now. Like, I deserve those things. And even if you don't believe it deep down at first, if you can say it, it starts to catch up,
Yeah. And that can be the ritual
Yeah.
of it. I mean, let's just say this to myself.
Yeah. I mean, you've been telling yourself the opposite for your entire life, so it makes sense that it would take some time for the opposite to sink in.
Correct.
Yeah. You are closely connected to baby blues. Closely connected to baby blues connection. Can you share a little bit more about your role there and what sorts of resources and support they offer?
Yeah, for sure. So it was really funny when I made this switch into birth work. I'm just such a believer that like the universe will just guide you right along. And if you're kind of on the right path. And this experience was just one. I read also, I love this term of like, do more things that feel like silk. Like it was just so smooth and easy. And I kind of just like had reached out to baby blues because I had so much anxiety and depression after my own birth. And I just am so passionate about mental health care. And so I was just planning to volunteer and they're like, no, we'd actually like you to join the board. So I joined the board and headed up their marketing team committee and just was able to like, it felt so good to be able to share my experience in like brand strategy and marketing to a lot, nonprofit who obviously people just don't come from that skill set. And so that I felt like I was able to really impact and help in that way. Baby Blues Connection, just to back up a bit, they are a local nonprofit here in Portland who support families coping with postpartum mood and anxiety disorders. So anything from depression and anxiety to bipolar to psychosis, they have tools to help support you in that. And so it's all free. They do a lot of peer support. So you can do virtual and also some in person now again, groups where you're with other parents who are coping. And there's a facilitator who's been trained and is kind of an expert in that space, who's been through it before. So it is also different than therapy in that there's this real sharing of story. It's a two-way dialogue and people get a lot out of it. And so yeah, there's the groups. There's also one-on-one support. So if you're having trouble finding a therapist or group support just isn't for you, they can help they'll text with you or talk to you about what you're going through. And then, yeah, we work with a lot of providers and hospitals and people will go do presentations, just to help educate providers on, perinatal mental health. So yeah, it's all just basically rooted in the mission of trying to improve, the support for people who need it in mental health aspect.
Yeah, it's a great
amazing
resource.
Yeah.
And on their website, they have a ton of other resources too.
Yeah. Very much a connector, a conduit. that's what I like is, and I talk so much about that, but this idea of like trying to break down barriers for people to get the care that they need. And the last thing you need when you're already totally overwhelmed or overstimulated or whatever you're going through is to have to sift through all these providers who aren't accepting new patients or whatever. Like, so having someone who can almost be like your concierge or something who can like kind of just help give you options and bring it right to you, like that is what people need when they're in that.
It's so valuable. We sort of asked you after you shared your birth story advice that you had, but I guess shifting over into the lens as a birth story listener, do you have any tips you'd like to offer a parent in the postpartum? We spoke about how the postpartum is really a time that lacks support and like everyone focuses on the birth. So do you have any specific tips for someone in postpartum?
I think just knowing, like, it sounds so overdone, but like just this idea that you're not alone in what you're feeling. It can feel so isolating and you can feel like there's something wrong with you for feeling the way that you do. But whatever you're feeling or going through, likely most people have also felt it to some degree. And so just encouraging people that if they're not feeling good more days than not, like, there are people who can help you, and that you actually really do deserve to feel happy. And it is a challenging, complex time when you become a parent, but that doesn't mean it has to be miserable or torturous, like we can still find ways to inject joy into that. And, it's hard to do if you don't have support. So just feeling kind of deep, digging down into that bravery to be a little uncomfortable to ask for help or get yourself connected with, whether it's a free resource like Baby Blues Connection, just some way to help you get through that. Like, it's gonna pay off down the road. It's like, it's one of my few regrets is that I didn't ask for help, because I just didn't have a great experience and I can't really take that back, but it is quite redemptive helping other people now have better experiences. But I think it really boils down to that willingness to ask for and receive help because you believe deep down that you deserve that.
Yeah, you're paving the way, removing the shame. It's really important and helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And listening to people. Like, I feel like I want to reach out to you in this process.
Please, yeah.
But thank you. Yeah. How can people find you?
So I have a couple businesses. The Birth Story Processing is just that. It's birthstoryprocessing.com. I do kind of my doula postpartum work through Heartswell, doula.com is the website. And then there's an Instagram, heartswell.postpartum, that I'm not terribly active on, but I'm in and out of it. Yeah. And then, so either they can reach out through any of the websites, and I'm happy to, even if it's just helping connect them, to resources or whatever they need, I'm very happy to try to help people along however I can.
Anything you feel like we might have missed that you wanted to share about your work, or?
Oh gosh, I don't know. It's pretty endless. I just appreciate you to doing the work you're doing to help. Because I think even this, just having a platform for people to share their stories and other people to hear their stories, that alone can help offset some of that otherness or that feeling of isolation. It just can help you remind people that what they're going through is not unique to them, even if they themselves are very unique, special individuals. Like, it kind of just helps you feel a sense of connectedness and when you really need it. So yeah,
we're all working together with a similar mission.
That's right.
Our own little lane.
Yeah.
Somehow. So
Hopefully more and more people will process their stuff, all their stuff.
Yeah, totally. I know. It's not, that's another important, it's like, it goes so much
Yeah.
more. This is not actually unique to birthing
Yeah.
people. It's like,
Yeah.
it's really everyone.
Yeah.
Birth happens to be just like this hyper, concentrated moment, but,
Because I think what it is with birth, like you have to go through it. That's like there's no, I'm just going to reverse time
Yeah.
and not have this baby come out.
isn't that right? Yep.
So you're forced in a way.
And you have this constant reminder, a child to be like, oh yeah, this thing just happened to you.
Yeah.
Remember?
Oh
You
man.
can
Yeah.
push other stuff down and never go back.
You're right. I mean, that's it. Yeah. It's very confronting.
Yeah.
Which is great. That's how we grow. But it's
Not easy.
yeah, that's it.
But thank you, Libby,
Thank
for coming
you
on
both.
again.
It was so fun talking.
Yeah.
I feel very uplifted.
Yeah, me too.
me
I
too.
feel really inspired. What I do at the end of every episode too,
Yeah.
with everyone who comes on. Storytelling and talking and communicating is so
It's really magical.
magical. Yeah.
Well, you're in the right space. You're doing great work. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bearing Birth is available on all major podcast streaming services. We invite you to subscribe as well as follow us on Instagram at Bearing Birth Podcast.